Hello, everyone. I'm Devi Jags, and this is Sparkle On. Sparkle is your happiness, passion, and self-worth. And today I am so excited to have a guest that I've been waiting to have on, Suuvi. She's a multidisciplinary artist. She is a Cuban Chinese, which influences a lot of her work, specifically as a cello soloist. She was kind of this child prodigy, right? She was accepted into Juilliard at 10 years old, which launched her 15 plus career. She's been on world renowned stages, and she's also a big mental health advocate. We have connected because of our mental health advocacy work. We met each other at the Hollywood and Mind conference, and we just started talking about everything under the sun. We went to lunch with a bunch of other mental health advocates, but really just going with this new direction of Sparkle and going all in on understanding artists and their creative process, how mental health plays a role, what it means to shine. Like, Suuvi is the guest for this new pivot. So I'm really happy to have you.
I'm really happy to be here. And actually, I was thinking of this morning because I was doing my morning pages.
Yay! Oh my God. Guys, I can't stop talking about The Artist Way. I think I talk about it at least once a day, maybe twice a day. Julia Cameron's The Artist Way. I mean, it's for every human on the planet because I believe every human is creative. So that's so exciting to hear.
Yeah, and I remember we were talking about it the day we met at the conference. And I said that I had the book and I wanted to start doing it, and you were like, you have to do it. And you were actually the person who finally got me to do it, because I've had it, like, I've honestly probably had like multiple copies given to me, or just like that I picked up for probably like 7 years.
Yeah.
But you were talking about it so enthusiastically that I was like, okay, I think this is a sign. It's time to do it. And I've been doing it for the last maybe, like, I think I'm on week 6 now.
Oh, wow.
Which apparently all my friends are like, wow, we usually don't, like, most of my friends apparently dropped off after like 2-3 weeks. I have a lot of friends who like tried to do it. But yeah, it's been so useful. And at first I was like, how is this different than journaling? Like, how is this different than, every other exercise I've done? But it's been incredible because it helps me sort through all the bullshit in my mind every morning when I wake up. And there's often a lot of it.
I think it's so interesting because when you know and commit to a program, it is just different. You just start to see things happening, and they're not necessarily big and profound in the way that I think maybe some people would hope, which is probably why they drop off, right? I think for myself, I have just gained so much clarity through the morning pages, and I've started to understand myself as an artist in just a few weeks' time more than I ever have in my life, because of that book. And that is kind of the point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the thing with any sort of, like you said, like any program or life change that you commit to. I think people often feel like it's going to be like this overnight, like, oh my God, I started a diet. Like, I'm going to feel amazing in 24 hours. Or like, I started a new workout routine. It's like, you have to give things time. And even if you don't notice it in the moment, it's those tiny incremental changes that over time compound. And then you're like, wait, my creative output is like 10x now. And my brain is so much clearer. But I think my favorite thing about the morning pages is just that I think it really helps me. Like, sometimes there's so much going on because, as you know, I do like 50 million things.
Guys, her bio is insane. Like, the longest I've ever seen.
I do too much, like, all the time. So because of that, I feel like I'm always like juggling so many different things that sometimes I wake up and I'm like overwhelmed and stressed, but I don't even know what it is. But then I just this free flow writing it out, it'll sometimes even help me understand, like, oh, this is actually the thing that's stressing me out or on my mind. And then once I know, I'm like very aware and I can manage it. But sometimes it's like you're even in denial to yourself. Like, I've made several actually like really big decisions as a result of stuff that came out of morning pages, where like after looking back at what came out, I would like write and then arrive at like the actual point. And then I'd be like, okay, this thing has to change, or this thing has to go, or I have to do this thing. But yeah, you do them. So,
well, I think too, it's like, at the start of the book, she says that writers usually struggle the most with it. And I will say, like, that is very much the case for myself, because like it's hard for me not to think about like my large manuscript project and be like, well, shouldn't my writing time being like go into this? And it's like getting into that format, right? Of like maybe just writing lists of things that are bothering you has been really, really uncomfortable to me, because I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, like not to get really dark here, but I'm like, what happens when I die one day and like my future daughter finds all these journals? She's gonna think I'm crazy, because she's like, because she says don't let anyone read these, but like that day will come.
I think
I'm
about
like,
that.
do you think about it too?
No, I think about that too, because sometimes I'm writing things that I'm like, should I give people nicknames? Like, what if someone finds this?
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, you know, at first it reminded me actually a little bit of my meditation practice in the sense that, you know, committing to this practice, like it doesn't just change your life overnight. But for me, like I practice TM, which if you're familiar with, it's a twice a day mantra based meditation, and it's 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the second half of the day. And before I started doing TM, I was like the most mentally chaotic person ever. I was super stressed out, neurotic. I had really bad insomnia. I didn't sleep for like 15 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was bad. And then I remember just thinking, I was like, how can I take, you know, 20 minutes twice a day out of my day, plus, you know, the time around it. It's really like an hour a day to meditate. Like that's so much time. It's time I could use to do other stuff. But then I finally just was like, I went through like you said, having a program really structures you. I did their training program and then I committed to really doing it. I've been doing it for over 2 years now. It's like been almost 2.5 years. And it completely changed my life. Like everyone who knows me now, they're like, there's a very clear difference between who you were before you started meditating and after. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing with the morning pages. It's like you take these, you know, 20 minutes out of your day and it may feel like a lot of time, but the time you gain back in clarity is so much more valuable, because I just think about how often I would just be, you know, trying to work on a project, but spiraling over, you know, not being able to give it the right direction. And I think having that unstructured, free flow writing just really helps you. It gives, what you're doing is you're giving yourself permission to actually be messy.
Yeah.
And like face whatever it is you don't really want to.
Yeah. And so that kind of makes me think about a lot about your style as an artist. I think sometimes, you know, we throw around the terms like multi-hyphenated artists or multidisciplinary artists. And I like those terms because it helps embrace that you know how to do a lot in different mediums. Whereas like before you had to label yourself as like a painter or a singer. And I think a lot of people who aren't necessarily pursuing their creative works as a career just kind of like, well, oh, like you're all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. But then you look at your bio and you're like, oh, like, you know. So I guess my question to you is like, how, as a person that has to make a living, right? Like, do you balance all these different mediums for yourself?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Well, for a long time, for me, it was actually a big, almost internal struggle to figure out what I was, because I started playing cello when I was 2. So pretty much my whole life, when it came to identity, like cello was attached to me. Like people would be like, she's a cellist. She's a cellist. Like that's how people introduced me, especially because I started performing and working so young. I think the first couple years of when I started to pivot out of doing strictly cello, people were almost confused, and it was actually a struggle to get them to understand that I was doing other things and actually really serious about doing them. Because I think traditionally, in general in society, we tend to think of people as like one kind of thing. Like,
Right.
I mean, this isn't just in terms of your profession. Like we have, I think, a very black and white way of looking at people in general. And like, this goes to a deeper place for me because I'm also biracial. So, you know, I'm half Latina, half Asian, there was always like from birth a dichotomy about like, am I this or that? And how can I be both? And like, do I have to choose one? And same with my art. Like, you know, I went through very strict classical training, and in the classical system, traditionally, it was very much considered like if you were not spending all of your time studying and practicing and working on your main craft, which in my case, my major was cello, you were basically not taking it seriously, and time spent doing other things was like time wasted and time that you should have been spending in the practice room. So even from like a really young age, I was sort of rebellious in the sense that like when I was 15, I was studying at Juilliard, but I was also studying art at MoMA. So I would like sneak out of Juilliard, go down to MoMA, do my like art projects, and then go back to the practice room. And it was hard for me because I'd have to like hide things from different people. But I think for me, you know, what I realized actually after a lot of experience working with a lot of different types of artists was that ultimately, I think we're all actually doing the same thing, and it's all coming from the same place. We're just expressing it through different mediums. And what I mean by that is ultimately, like, I think the role of the artist is to translate emotions and human experience into something that they can transmute to others so that they can feel those things and relate to them. And it's all really storytelling at its core. So for me, a really pivotal moment was during the pandemic because I had no more performance opportunities. Everything was closed down at the time. That's when I really leaned into, like, I was also studying film at Columbia at the time. I went really, really deep into the film area of things and started producing short films with like performing artists, mostly ballet dancers and myself and other musicians. And that's when I realized like you could take the mediums that we had all perfected, whether it was, you know, ballerina who was used to being on a stage or, you know, a cellist who was used to being on a stage, but show it through film and it would actually be accessible to different audiences who wouldn't traditionally have access to it. Like even just in the sense that it was like a digitally produced thing that was accessible, you know, worldwide. And also just like, it gave me so much more creative freedom, feeling like I wasn't restricted to one medium or area. Yeah. And I've only found that like with more and more time, it's grown. And even within, you know, within music itself, like I realized the other day, I don't actually consider myself a classical musician anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I think traditionally, I mean, that was my training. And obviously, like, I know how to do classical music very well, but like, I think of myself as an artist first, and classical music is just one thing that I'm well versed in. But the output of what I make now is so diverse. Even like, you know, within music, I haven't really done much classical music for the last 3 years. Most of the stuff I've been doing is much more leaning into other genres. So it's been interesting to like reframe that identity. But at the core, I always like, you know, going back to your question of like, how do you kind of make it all work? I just think I'm really finding different ways of expressing the same thing I've always wanted to express, which is like what I've been feeling.
I love that. And because I always feel like sometimes I'm going back to the same stories, but then it's sometimes scary to venture into this other medium, right? What was that moment that you kind of decided to stop hiding? Like you literally said you were sneaking off to I'm literally just picturing like little you doing that like around New York City at age 15. It should have been a movie. We'll talk about that later.
I skipped a lot of classes. Yeah, it's weird because on one hand, it's funny because if you look at my like academic background, it's like, it's funny. There's again a dichotomy within it because it's like, it reads as this like overachiever that like did all the right things. But I always say that I did all the right things while making sure that I did them on the terms that allowed me to get away with the most possible on my terms.
That's very powerful.
So yeah, so it was interesting. I basically structured all of my time in school in a way that was conducive to me being able to do what I wanted. And I was lucky that I managed to get away with it. But I still don't know how I have all the degrees that I have because I managed to skip so much class. Like,
guys, she graduated high school at 15. Oh, wait, can we go through the timeline a little bit for clarity?
Yeah. So do you want me to go through it?
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
So I graduated high school when I was 15, but the reason why I did that was because I wanted to go to study in Paris. So I kind of woke up one morning when I was I was 15, and I was like, Mom, I want to go study in Paris. And she's like, well, you still have 3 years left of high school. So I was like, well, let me figure this out. And she's like, if you can figure this out, you can do it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to accelerate the last 3 years of high school, learn French, and I only applied to one school in Paris because I was like very set on like one place I wanted to go. So I spent like a very crazy like 5-6 months where I basically just like woke up every morning, would practice cello from like 5 a.m. till 10 a.m., study throughout the day, and teach myself French in the evening. And in like 5 months, I did my 3 years of high school and got into the school I wanted to in Paris. So that was chapter 1 of like exiting home. Then went to Paris and then realized that I could accelerate my undergrad. So I did it in 2 years, while also making sure to like party a lot. I was
How?
I didn't sleep for like 2 years.
Oh yeah,
I
you did say you struggled with
didn't
insomnia.
sleep. I like literally slept like 2 hours a night. It was actually kind of crazy. I don't know how I did it.
Did you feel the health effects from
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yeah. That's like
I just want to know if you're human. That's all I was kind of curious about.
Like after those 2 years, I remember I went home and my mother, like literally, I kid you not, she saw me. She's like, you look terrible. And she put me on a 3-week juice cleanse. She was like, I don't know what you've been doing out there, but you're not healthy. Aww. But I did graduate in 2 years. And then I took a sabbatical and I was traveling around Europe for a while, during which I also went to work in tech briefly. And then I did my grad in Berlin, and then I did my post-grad at Juilliard and Columbia. So that was the timeline. And then I moved here. So
what age you moved here at? What, 21?
25.
25.
I took a 3-year gap in between my undergrad and grad.
Okay. But the gap year was you touring the world as a performer.
Yeah.
Like, I don't call that a gap year. I mean, I don't think most people would, but
yeah, it was a lot. Like when I think back to it, it's funny because nowadays my work is much more focused in the studio because I'm more of a producer composer primarily. So I don't travel as much, but I was thinking back to it. I found a list the other day of, for some reason I was logging all the flights I was taking at the time. And like during that time period, I took like over 650 flights. It was crazy. I was on a plane like probably like 3 to 5 times a week.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And speaking of like, I know we're going to touch upon this later, but like mental health, all of this contributed to burnout, which is why I partly got into mental health advocacy, because I feel like the first chapter of my life was very much focused on like this fast and furious path where I was like, I want to accelerate all my degrees. I want to like do everything as quickly as possible and like do as much as possible all the time. And I think that's also a bit the New Yorker in me where I was like, hustle culture, let's glorify it. Like I used to literally work like 20-hour days and take pride in that. And nowadays, I wouldn't work a 20-hour day now unless I absolutely had to. But like now, if I were working 20-hour days on a regular basis, I'd be like, something's drastically wrong with my life.
Right.
And I think that's something, so like I said, I moved to LA when I was 25 and I'm 29 now. I think in the last like 3.5 years since moving here, I've really changed my lifestyle and understood that there's also value in pacing and slowness.
I think like as you were talking though, I'm like, because you were so young, right? Like I don't ever discount a child's love for something and like their ambition. Like I was very much like that. They absolutely have a sense of conviction in what they want. And I think It's important to honor that. But like what you were saying, like you had this keen awareness about yourself that like you knew you wanted to pursue other things than classical music. But like, did you love it when you first picked up a cello? Like, do you remember that moment?
Yeah. So this was actually a really big source of massive confusion and conflict in my life for a really long time. So basically my father was a cellist and he was very determined. I was the firstborn in my family to have a child who was a cellist. And apparently the first thing that happened when I came home from the hospital was he put me down in front of him, played me the cello. And according to him, I was super captivated, which I'm sure I was. But I think there's this question of like, nature versus nurture. And I think you are a product of your environment. I think it was, for me, like inevitable that I was going to play cello because it was there and it was such an omnipresent part of my environment. My father also makes instruments as a living now. So literally there were like instruments everywhere and musicians all the time in my house. So for me, it was very normal to just be around classical music and, you know, it was inevitable. But by the time I was in my early 20s, it was also very clear to me that I was super miserable in my career. And it created this huge internal conflict because on one hand, I had devoted, you know, countless hours. I'd essentially given up a childhood to pursue excellence at this one thing. And I had achieved it, which actually was kind of the scariest part because it's usually like when you achieve this massive goal, you're happy and fulfilled and you're, you know, you should be happy. And I was like, why do I feel worse than ever, actually?
As a child, you felt that?
Yeah, I felt I was not a happy child. And even, you know, for me, the hardest part over the last couple of years, and now I'm very comfortable like admitting it and talking about it and verbalizing it, was that I essentially did something. A large part of it was motivated by a desire to please my parents, and it was very much what they wanted for me. But the thing that I extracted from it was, for a long time, I was like, does this mean I just hate music? Because I was like, you know, I had this whole conflict because I was like, I don't want to do this. I hate my career. I come off stage and I basically want to cry. Like I was really, really, really not happy doing things that were like, should have been like milestone achievements. Like literally I would like perform at Carnegie Hall. And I remember this is literally what happened. I then spent 3 days lying in bed, like ordering takeout, like miserable. So I was like, okay, I should be fulfilled, but I'm not. And that's when I realized that I'd basically gotten to the point of exhaustion, kind of like physically and mentally and emotionally after completing all these degrees, where I was like, I've pretty much like checked all the boxes of what I thought I wanted to do and like what my parents wanted me to do. And I'm not happy and I need to do something different. So that's when I came to LA, really with the goal of learning about music that wasn't classical music. And the big conflict I had for a long time was actually like extracting cello and classical music from music at large and actually kind of like reclaiming my relationship with music and even the instrument. Because at first I thought I hated the cello. And then over time I realized actually I love the cello. I just wanted to use it in a different way. And now that I write my own music, I love the cello. Like I use the cello in almost everything that I write, but it's my voice. And it's, you know, as a classical musician, you're always playing music that someone else wrote. So it was very much like, I felt like I was basically like serving someone else's vision. And the big change for me, which was 2 years ago when I felt like I like reclaimed my identity, was, I literally like overnight changed my name like everywhere. Like I just woke up, I'd been thinking about it for a long time. And I woke up one day and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I changed like all of my, like my website, all my social media handles, like email, like everything changed overnight. And I was like, I'm closing this chapter of my career and life. I'm no longer doing classical music and I'm doing something new. I had no plan though. Like I literally was like, I'm doing something new, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And it took me maybe like another year after that to really realize that what I wanted to do was write my own music. And that's when I started doing that. And it's been like smooth sailing and super fulfilling and really like gratifying to reclaim this whole relationship where I realized like what I didn't hate was music. It was not being able to use my own voice. So yeah, now I'm like super happy with what I do. I don't regret any of my past. The only thing, if I had to say I wish I could have done differently, is coming to this realization earlier. But I'm like, you know what? It took 27 years. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. It's so interesting because sometimes I think we hear stories where like it feels like you made this change and it's like wrapped up in a bow, like things worked out. And I think that exists. But I also feel like when you have this moment, I resonate with I'm doing this change, but like not having a plan. You're just announcing it because it's not for anyone else but yourself, right? But like, how do you continuously tell yourself, excuse my French, I don't give a fuck. Like, and it's all about me, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about my art, and you're going to do whatever you need to keep pursuing that. Like, how do you have to keep telling yourself that, or like you made that change and for you, like that was it?
Oh yeah, it was hard. Well, I'd say the first year of it was the real like hard part where I was constantly questioning. I was like, what have I done? I threw away like a career that I built for like 25 years. And now I'm like, I don't know who I am or what I'm doing. And that's when I think it's actually really important to have people who are looking at you from the outside who believe in you and support you. And I was so tremendously lucky that I have like the best manager ever, very close family members who are amazing and super supportive, friends who are super supportive. Like I was joking with a couple of my close friends because I just started working on my second album. My first album's coming out this summer, but the second one I'm already starting to write. And it's very much not a classical album in any way. It's actually, I'd call it an electronic album, and it's also using vocals. So that was another big thing for me. Like I had always wanted to sing and I felt like I wasn't allowed to. So I was in the studio like a week ago actually, and I was working on it and like tracking vocals and putting down like crazy synth lines and stuff. And then I sent a video of it to a couple of my close friends who had been there when I first started trying to do this like about a year ago. And I was like, remember when I would like call you at like 3 a.m. because I couldn't sleep because I was like, I don't know if I'm like allowed to write music or like allowed to sing. And that was actually one of the deep things that like mentally I had to deal with, because it wasn't so much about the ability, but more like the permission. Because my big fear when I did this whole change, like deep down, I knew I could learn to do all the things I would want to do. Like even if tomorrow I decided to do like something else I've never really like considered doing, I'm sure I could learn how to do it. It was more the permission. And I realized like most of the time, the mental block and the person who's like not giving you permission is actually yourself.
Yeah.
And all these things now that are so easy and natural for me to like, you know, go in and sing or go in and write whatever. A year ago, I was struggling with, because I was like, what if I can't do it and what will people think of me? And that was the big thing that was actually holding me back for a super long time. And it was this fear of like other people's judgment. But at the end of the day, I think for me, like the older I get and the more experienced I get, the less and less I care about what others say. And not in like a fuck you way, but more just like it ultimately doesn't really matter as long as, you know, within like reasonable means, if you're not like hurting anybody with your actions, like what anybody does with their life, as long as they're fulfilled and happy and they can make it work, like who are we to judge, or who's anyone to judge?
Well, I think it's also like it's not talked about enough. Like we're talking about compounding effects, the compounding effects of what happens when you don't give yourself permission and you do suppress your art. Like I think that's like going back to the artist way is what's so scary is like, it's not to say that people don't struggle with mental health, but you have to wonder, and again, within reason of saying this, but like you have to wonder how many people are just suppressing their own creativity, and it's because they're afraid, they're not giving themselves the permission, they're afraid that they're not good enough. But it's like that first step is so hard. I know it. Like I get frozen all the time. People think someone replied to my close friend's story the other day about like a thought that I had that I ended up pitching to a magazine, right? They're like, oh my gosh, you work so fast. No, I don't. No, I don't. There's some lightning under my ass sometimes for certain ideas, but there's a lot that like I will literally be laying on the floor freaking out. Like I don't know this next step of what this project looks like. Like, and it's just, I think it just goes back to, you know, your story of you were taking 650 flights in a year. You were like, what and how did that kind of breaking point happen for you? What did that look like?
Yeah, well, Really quickly, also, it's really funny that you say what you just said, because when I look at you, you're also one of those people where I'm like, she has it all together. She's doing so much. She like has her shit together. And it's really funny because no, but the funny thing is, I think it's important to talk about this because people say that to me all the time too. They're like, you just seem like so confident and put together, and like you always have a plan and you know what you're doing. And every time you say you're going to do something, you go out and execute it, and it just like happens effortlessly. And I'm like, is that what it looks like out there? Because internally, that is so not how it's going down.
Well, people also have to realize when you share a plan of action that it's not out of like, I guess it's not even like out of like announcement or validation. It's excitement of like, oh my God, this has been agonizing me for 6 weeks. I'm telling you because I'm in a little less pain.
Yeah. Like, and also like the other thing, I think I'm super transparent about it. I'm like, guys, I probably get like 500 ideas a year. And like, just because you see me actually follow through on like 10 projects, that doesn't mean that like, you know, the other, okay, it's not literally like 490 that failed, but you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like for every idea that actually like works and you follows through and you see that end result and the product and the finished version of it, there were so many like things that I started, things that I thought about doing, things I consulted people about that just like didn't pan out, or, you know, you hit a roadblock, and sometimes projects don't work. And I don't think, you know, if anyone, I'd actually be more suspicious of someone who claimed that all of their projects always worked.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd be like, one, you're either lying or you're like, I don't know, you're a trust fund baby and you have a lot of money behind your shit or something. Because it's like, otherwise there's like, the reality is things don't work. And one of the, I think, important things actually about things not working is that then you learn how to pivot and you learn how to recover and you learn how to be resilient. I'd be really suspicious if someone wanted to work with me and they told me they'd never experienced failure. I'd be like, something's very wrong here.
Yeah.
Like you've either been sheltered or I don't really know.
Well, what if they said that they've never experienced failure because of some sort of answer that totally makes sense when you think about it, but like it's not a failure, it's like a lesson, like that kind of thing.
That's different because that's how I see my, you know, what I could potentially perceive as failure is like I see everything as a lesson. But if someone straight up like every shot I shoot lands, I'm like, and I'm an optimist. I'm like, I would love to believe that there's a life where that happens, but I just don't think that actually in reality happens that way.
And it's hard, I think, because again, like going back to kind of, well, dealing with that permission, right? Mm-hmm. You do have a perception, right? Like, I think that's sometimes what gets to me a lot, right? Like people think I have it all together.
Yeah.
They think that about you. I mean, I went in here thinking that too. And like, I know you, so it's a little different. Like I know you've had your, you know, your breaking points, but like, I think that's also fed into my own breaking points. Mm-hmm. What was your breaking point and what was feeding that at the time?
Yeah. So I'd say for me, the very clear, I guess you could call them like, there were smaller breaking points, but the very clear, obvious one when I look back on my life and career was when I was 23. So I'd gone through basically a lot of very severe personal traumas that had happened in my close family with several family members in a very short period of time, compounded with, at the time, I had just started my postgrad at Juilliard and I had just received this award that they give like one student a year. And I, you know, there was all this pressure on me.
What was the award called?
It's called the Leo B. Ruiz Award. It's something they give to like one student a year and they get like a Carnegie Hall debut, which is what I got. So, you know, there was all this pressure on me where like I was talking to management companies that wanted to sign me. Like there were all these, I was performing a lot, I was traveling a lot, and then personal crises happened. And I just hit this breaking point where there was so much pressure on me and I had been so stressed out for really my whole life. And I had a major suicide attempt, and that started this complete period of like mental breakdown and turmoil that took probably like 5 years to recover from. And it was really messy. Like, I remember in the immediate time afterwards, you know, without getting into like all the nitty gritty details, obviously there was just a lot of chaos. There was a lot of like figuring out, you know, what was wrong with me. Like, and, you know, I hesitate to even say the word wrong because like, I don't want people to think of, you know, having a mental breakdown as a flaw,
Right.
but, you know, just what needed to be changed in my life. But I think the scariest part at the time, which I now look back on and think was probably one of the things that was actually to my detriment, was the people around me. There were several close people who were very supportive, but there were also several close people who were completely, I want to think they were, you know, misinformed about mental health and said things that just were really damaging because they made me feel like I was actually like permanently broken. So, for example, my PR agent at the time essentially told me that she's like, okay, well, you can never talk about this ever publicly because if you do, your entire career will tank and no one will ever take you seriously again if they know that you've had this kind of like, you know, mental health crisis. And I was like, okay, so that immediately turned the whole thing of what I was going to into this like shameful secret that I had to hide. Cause I was like, oh my God, if someone finds out what I'm going through, you know, my whole career is going to go away.
Was that because of like maybe how much like you were surrounded by these super elite, very traditional structures and systems?
I think it was partly that, and it was partly maybe even just the time. I mean, this was 2019.
Right.
And you know, you and I are both really closely, you know, involved in mental health advocacy, and we know a lot of people in it. And 2019, even though it was not that long ago, like the landscape was very different back then.
Absolutely.
And I think it was still very much the stigmatized thing. I mean, it still is today, where it was like, okay, if you're having a mental health crisis, this is like, you know, you're unreliable or you're, you know, like a danger to yourself and like all these things. But also, you know, I had someone very close to me at the time basically tell me that I was damaged goods. And that was the thing that really, like, I took that and internalized it for a very long time after this. And it was super, super harmful because I had turned to this person. It was someone I had been close to for several years. And they basically were like, thank God you're out of my life. You're damaged goods. And I was like, okay. And
Is this a friendship breakup story now?
no, this is actually an ex-boyfriend.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, this was a boyfriend I had lived with for 3 years. So we had broken up when I moved back to the States about a year before. And I called him after the whole thing happened just to kind of talk to him about, I was like, you know, you lived with me for 3 years and you knew me really well. You know, did you ever see any signs of me having some sort of like, you know, something that would contribute to a mental breakdown? And he just dismissed the whole thing as like, thank God we broke up, you're damaged goods. And so that was a comment that just like super, super stuck with me for a really long time, where it also made me really afraid about talking about this to potential partners, where I was like, what if I tell someone who's interested in dating me that this happened to me and I went through this and they view me as damaged goods and don't want to be with me? And so it just turned into this like perpetual cycle of fear and shame. So for, I'd say the first 3 years, I basically just didn't talk about it and dealt with it very, very silently. And then I had the moment of like actual breakdown, where I realized like I had almost been like numbing myself for 3 years by telling myself I was okay because I was like pretty high functioning still, which like I feel like really type A people like me, we could like the world could be burning around us and we'd still be like, I'm fine. And 3 years after this, I had a moment where I hadn't cried actually for like 3 years. Like I had this period of like dissociation where I just like felt numb all the time, where I was like, everything hurts, so I'm just gonna like not feel anything. And it was 3 years later that I had a moment where I spoke to actually like a total stranger about it. I met someone while I was traveling who had gone through like a similar traumatic experience. And we just started sharing our stories with one another. And I literally broke down and started crying for like 24 hours straight. Like I was in San Francisco. I like got on a plane back to LA. I was like still crying when I got back. And that's when I realized I was like, wait, I'm not okay. And I actually need to like tell the people around me. And I spent the next couple days actually going to see all of my close friends in LA and basically telling them like, this is all the stuff that I've been going through. And all of them were so supportive. And
That's
they were,
good.
yeah, they were like, you don't have to go through this alone. Like, we're here for you. And they gave me like the space to feel seen and safe and held and supported. And that's when I realized like, wait, actually, you know, that whole initial like response that I got, which is that, you know, you need to hide this. This is shameful. Like, you're damaged goods. That created a lot of like misery for myself. And then this community of people who actually like embraced and accepted me actually created this space that allowed me to start to heal. So right after this, I started my TM meditation training. I got completely sober. I was like, it was this transformative period. And it was actually because people around me told me that they accepted me and that, you know, I was still like worthy and still loved and still, you know, the same person to them despite what was going on. And that's why I think when we talk about mental health, it's so important to frame it from this narrative of like support and acceptance rather than ostracization and shame, which is what I think, you know, misinformed people do.
It's, oh my God, I just resonate with so many things that you just said. I just like, you know, take a minute.
And I feel like I said a lot.
No, it was all magical. Don't get me wrong. I think, okay, from the advocacy brain, I think there would almost be an aspect of no matter how destigmatized mental health, and I don't even want to use the term mental health because it's so umbrella. No matter how much suicide awareness there is, I don't know if certain people will ever know to say the right thing in that initial moment. And it's going back to your ex-boyfriend, because when I was hospitalized on suicide watch, I had a horrible ex-boyfriend. And I mean, looking back, he was the reason, but I remember like the doctor like gave me capabilities to like supervise to talk on FaceTime to this person because I would start having panic attacks because of the lack of communication. And they had to kind of analyze like, is this person causing the panic attacks, or is it the only thing like saving her like to be able to breathe right now? Mm-hmm. And it was like this person didn't party, but that weekend they decided to go out and like party. And mind you, there was always like speculation that he was cheating and things like that. He was, but it's not the point of the story that I'm trying to say. The point is every at least traumatic event that I've had, and I'm sure you might be able to relate with this, is like in those the most vulnerable and scariest moments, it is frightening that the people that should be the closest to you reveal colors that disappoint you, that lead to kind of like even more breaking down.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know how like we would even like, I think like what I'm trying to say is like, if there's any awareness that to be spread and a message that needs to be understood for someone that is like absolutely struggling, like on the brink of not okay, is like, there is going to be someone that says the absolute wrong thing and they should be that person there for you and they're not. Like, please keep trying to find the next person that shows you that safety.
Yeah. You know, I was at this event the other night with this children's mental health organization where we were brainstorming how to essentially teach children to identify safe adults when it comes to disclosure. And that was one thing I realized, because we were talking about, you know, how important it is for kids to know, like, you know, this is an adult you can talk to who will be supportive. This is an adult who will not know what to do. And I was like, honestly, we need this for adults too, because, you know, often saying the wrong thing is worse than even not being there. And I've definitely seen that happen, not just with these incidents that I just spoke about, but there have been several moments in my life where I faced crisis, and either like people really showed me their true colors. And I had a really, really close friend. I'm someone who's very big on like trust and loyalty and character. And for me, I always say like I forgive, like I completely forgive people all the time. But if you've shown me something that has broken my trust in a way where I now don't really believe that your character is like like your character is now in question, I just can't associate with that person anymore. And I've had that happen with several close people in my life where like I had one incident when shortly after I moved to LA where I had a very traumatic injury, actually. Like I shattered my ankle. And my best friend at the time quite literally did not show up for me when she was supposed to. And I was like, I can't feel safe around you anymore. And I think in those moments, it really shows you like who's actually going to be there for you and who isn't.
Yeah.
And it's hard because sometimes, sometimes people don't show up. Like I kind of see, I'm also like a huge empath. So on the flip side, I also sometimes see that like one of the reasons why people don't show up or can't show up is sometimes because they are struggling or they're unaware or they don't have the, the self-awareness or maturity or ability to like provide space or emotional support or whatever it is, like in the way that they would even want to. But it's still kind of like, it's a tricky territory to get into, because I also went through a period where I started just excusing poor behavior all the time, because I would almost like over empathize with people who are actually hurting me, where I'd be like, well, yeah, but he's doing this because he has this trauma and like she's projecting this onto me because of like what happened to her. And I'm like, yes, but also at a certain point, like we do have to take agency and like, accountability for like our own actions. And I think there's a certain realm within which like common sense and decency are like parameters. So, if someone has just gone through a suicide attempt, calling them damaged goods is probably not the right answer.
No, it's absolutely not the answer.
Yeah, it's like, like it's a pretty like AV question, like yes or no. No, it's definitely not the right answer. But then there are also times where I'm like, I understand that suicide is a really difficult, like death in general, like anything like that it's a difficult subject for people. So I completely understand that like sometimes I just wouldn't want to talk about things because I'd be like, I'm afraid I'm going to make people around me uncomfortable, because these are really difficult subject matters for some people. And I understand that. But that's where it's like really important to have spaces and communities and organizations which do exist that are really well informed and know how to support in those sort of situations.
Well, I think it's like particularly hard for artists because their entire being is rooted in expression. So if you are an artist that has experienced a suicide attempt, it's inevitable that it's going to be part of your expression. And it's inevitable that everyone around you is going to have to sit with that discomfort. But that is why we are having that conversation around this person can't say you're damaged goods, because it's, you made them uncomfortable, but like they're not accepting you for who you are.
Yeah. And it's, it's funny. I performed somewhere recently and this girl came up to me afterwards and she was like, oh my God, like that was so beautiful. And she's like, I was sitting next to my friend and I was like telling her, I'm sure this girl has known pain. And I was like, yep. And so I was like, okay, yes, it's coming through in my art. And it's interesting because like nowadays I consider myself like a really happy person. Like I really truly am. Like there's no part of me that feels like depressed or like the way I used to feel. But then again, like when it comes to like the art I make, I'm like, all my music is really dark. And I'm like, it's definitely still, there's a lived reality of like, what you've experienced and it does come out somewhere. And it's really funny because like a lot of people will say this about me. They're like, yeah, when we like see you perform or like we hear your music or we like even just like see your image, we're always like, okay, she's like very dark. And then like you start talking and you're like really bubbly. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine now. Like I'm very happy now. But that's also why like I'm someone who I'm definitely not afraid of facing darkness. Like I'm very comfortable, like, cause I've literally like looked it in the eye and been like, fuck you. I'm gonna like walk away from this now. Like I've faced darkness in a very like visceral way in my life, like many, many times. And I know that other people are like, we can't pretend we live in like a fairy tale land all the way, like all the time. And so for me, like, I kind of strive to like, I think the reason why I'm comfortable addressing it, and it was also like really interesting to me because when I first started speaking about it, a really common response I would get, like when I would give like mental health keynotes at like conferences or like advocacy events, is like there would always be one person in the audience who would come, at least one, who would come up to me and be like, thank you so much for saying that. That was so brave of you. And then basically be like, we've also like gone through like a suicide attempt or suicidal ideation. And I was like really confused at the beginning, genuinely, because I didn't understand why people were calling it brave. I was
Oh
like,
my God, yes. That thing saying that drives me crazy.
yeah, well, because I was like, is it brave? Because to me,
Yeah.
I was like, it's just kind of like a reality of my life history. Like it's just another fact, like any other fact from my life. It would be like a lie to deny it. And it would be, you know, like, I don't think saying it makes me like a hero, and I'm not trying to be. It's really more like my motivation, or like, I don't know if motivation is the right word, but the only reason why, like the very first time I talked about it publicly was on the 5-year anniversary. And it was literally like a spur of the moment. Like I just woke up on the 5-year anniversary and I was like, wow, I can't believe it's been 5 years. And I just typed up a note on my Instagram and posted it. And then it just got such a crazy response. And so like literally I got like hundreds of DMs in like a day of people just being like, oh my God, we've like gone through this, and like comments and just being like, thank you for sharing this. It helps me feel seen. And I was like, okay, well, if there's a way for me to talk about this that, you know, helps people feel less alone, that's my motivation for doing it. It's not to like really draw attention to myself.
Yeah.
It was funny, actually. Did we talk about this weird comment I got? I don't know if I was talking to you about it. Okay, so it wasn't to you. I talked to someone else about it recently who's like also in mental health advocacy. I talked to our friend Deja about it. But
Okay.
I got this comment the other day, which was interesting because like generally when I talk about mental health, the response is like very positive. But of course, there's always like someone who's like really misguided. And I always say misguided or misinformed because I don't think they're doing it with malintent.
Yeah.
But this person, I posted like a mental health advocacy reel for like Mental Health Awareness Month. And this one person sent me a really long message basically being like, you're just doing this to try to get more followers and make money. And I was like, trust me, if you understood the like shame I went through after this and how much I hid this and had to like face myself to even be comfortable talking about this, like the last thing that you would ever think is like someone would willingly share this with the goal of like making money, which by the way, like I don't make money off of this fact of my life.
Yeah.
Like that was just like crazy. But yeah, and it was interesting because and then she also kind of went on to be like, meditation is a scam, which
That person sounds like they're in a lot of pain.
yeah, that was my first response. I was like, okay, like this person's definitely in a lot of pain. Like this is a them problem. But it was interesting because like my concern, like I didn't take it personally for myself at all, but I did like hide the comment because I was like, I don't want someone who is going through this currently to see this and now feel afraid about what, you know, disclosing what they're going through because they've seen one negative response to it.
Well, it's kind of going back to like that first response that you got when it's like, even on social media, it's like, all right, let's say their first form of expression is a reel, because let's face it, a lot of particularly young women who might not have like been able to get into Juilliard, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not even like something they even think of. Their form of expression is content creation.
Totally.
And so when they spend time putting something together on CapCut and they post that and they get a hurtful comment, it's gonna weigh on them.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been very lucky and like knock on wood, I've received very little like negativity online like my whole life. And I'm grateful for that. And like, let's hope it stays that way. But also, you know, I'm not afraid to like, you know, talk about controversial things. Like I'm very open about everything we're speaking about now. But I also do it with the awareness, like I'm sure I'm going to get more of this. And the reason why I'm okay with it, I don't think I would have been okay if I got a comment like this 5 years ago, if I tried talking about mental health. But the thing is like, I'm so secure in who I am today, and I know who I am, and I know what I believe in, and I know what I care about, and I know who cares about me. And like, my life is just very stable and my identity is very stable, but it was not stable before. And that's like, my concern is, like you said, for like the teenager who posts something and they got torn apart. Like, if you don't have that inner sense of like security, which takes a lot of time and experience to build, that can be like so harmful and so dangerous. And I often think about, like, whenever I see comments, even on like other people's stuff online, like you see like negative stuff, I always think about, like, would you say this to someone's face if they were in front of you?
No, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't. And like, do you not understand the repercussions of saying this to somebody? Like, that's what I almost wish there were, like a filter before you it's like before you can post something, like for people to be like, imagine if someone said something similar to you, like how that would land. And I'm like, is there just like no empathy filter on this person, or do you not care? Or like, it's quite shocking sometimes when you see like unchecked human behavior on the internet.
Well, last point, I think like so much that resonated with what you were saying is like, I always say that light and darkness exist in the same sky. That's, sparkle is born out of this messiness, this darkness that exists within myself, that exists within all of us. And it's really scary. And I think you even have this in your artist statement, is like, the only way out is in, right? The only way to reach this light is embracing and giving that darkness a hug. Totally. How do you, and especially now that you're experimenting way more with genre bending work, I also just don't like the construct of genre, but we can talk about that at a later point.
I could go on about that as well.
I know. And that's why I'm like, we might have to do a part 2 episode. But now when you are entering into this new chapter, really just not hiding anymore.
Yeah.
How do you find the light in your art?
I think, it's interesting because the only way out is in. Like, I think it's funny because, so my next album, which we've spoken about a little bit, is called Dark Therapy. And that album is quite literally about the darkest period of my life. Like it for me, that album is meant to be something that can guide you through deep shadow work and like facing your shadow. But for me, like, I went through a really deep period of like self-analysis and really like digging through my past and like looking at all of that, and then making a conscious choice to be like, okay, there's trauma in my past. Like, I'm not going to deny it, but I don't have to live there forever.
Yeah.
And it was actually something, one of my really good friends who's given me very good life advice said this to me once, because I was talking to him about, like all the trauma in my past and like all this stuff that like haunted me. And he was like, how long do you want to keep living there? And I was like, that is very wise. And I realized, as like looking forward on the trajectory of my life, I was like, I don't want to live in the past and I don't want to live in the darkness. So I think the reason why I've been able to like move forward and not stay stuck in everything that happened to me is because I actually just made this deliberate choice. Like, I remember very clearly, I was like, I'm going to choose to be happy. I'm going to choose to rebuild. And I think it's important to like understand your darkness and your shadow and your past, so that, it's built you, it's created who you are, and you need to understand how you got here. But then I think if some people can stay there. Like they start, and I was definitely there for like a couple years. I was like just so obsessed with like what had happened to me throughout my childhood and everything, that I was like stuck in the past. And it got to the point where I was like, I need to release this and actually think forward. And now everything I do, I want it to be through the lens of like empowerment and inspiration and light. And it's interesting, like, because like you said, it's like, it does come from darkness. Like the same sky holds both things. Like, I mean, even if you think about like color, like, you can't have light without dark. Like, it's all about the contrast. And
there's got to be some science mixed in there somehow.
Yeah, we'll consult the professionals. But and it's just interesting because like I see everything now as like almost like this avenue of like possibility and hope.
Yeah.
And I think that when you've come from such a dark place and made a conscious decision to not stay there, it's almost like anything becomes possible because everything feels so much easier than where you were.
Yeah.
And also, like, one of my mentors, she always like drills this into me and she's like, happiness feels better. And I'm like, it does.
It does.
I'm like, this is so much better than what we used to do. Like,
But then there's this also weird feeling that I think about sometimes when I'm in the dark listening to like the Counting Crows or something. And that weird feeling where you know this dark part that exists in you is also just like that you can point to and be like, yeah, I was in my darkness, but some glimmer, whether it's because of a song or an artist, brought some light out of it. And you just kind of like sitting in that little melancholy in between.
oh yeah.
I think that's where I create my best work.
Me too. Oh my God. Like all my best writing comes like music writing and honestly like ideas in general, I feel like come from like sleepless nights when I'm stressed about something.
Yeah.
Like I just wrote, it's funny. I was in the studio last week and I was like working on this song with a couple producers and they were like, this is like so great. And they're like, wait, what are the lyrics about? And I'm like, oh, it's about like the early days of like dating my boyfriend when I was like really anxious about getting to know him and I couldn't sleep. And so I wrote this about it and they were like, oh, we had no idea that was the context. I was like, yeah, but things are fine now. And like, we have a great song. So like, yay.
I love that. No, this was so interesting. Yeah, we might need a part 2. There's a lot more questions I want to ask.
Yeah. Oh my God. Anytime.
But thank you so much for joining us today. Sparkle on.
Thank you so much for having me.